led by Supervisor Wygant.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk of the board will read our statement of meeting procedures.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Monday, May 17th, 2010. Excuse me. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has the discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you, Ann. A couple other things as we get started here. As you can tell, when we come to Tahoe, it's a little bit more casual. None of the board members are in ties today. And so that persists throughout the meeting. Feel free to get up, get yourself some coffee. Coffee's up here. We have ice water in the back, but on a day like today, coffee might be better for you. So as the meeting goes on, feel free to wander up, grab yourself some coffee, and we will go ahead. And when we only have 2 items on for this afternoon, the 2 land use items, we do have closed session. And we will need to conduct our closed session in this room. So when our 2 items are over, we will ask folks, we're not going to usher you out the door immediately, but if you could, yes, if you could kind of make your way to the exit so that we can go ahead and convene our closed session when these 2 items are over, that would be helpful as well. So with that, let's go to public comment. Any members of the public here to address the board on, I'm sorry? We already did that. Yes. The coffee is right over there. Yeah.
He still thinks it's February.
Coffee's right over. We've got these little espresso beans in here, too. You can have. All righty, then. Little Groundhog Day right there. And so it is time for public comment. Any members of the public wish to address the board on any item that is not on the agenda, knowing that the board cannot take action on any item raised under public comment? Anybody wish to address the board on public comment? Seeing none, if it's okay with Supervisor Holmes, we'll go ahead and move into our 2:05 timed item, and I will turn it over to planning.
Planning Department, along with Steve Bielna, who'll be presenting this item today. Staff brings forward a request, a recommendation from the Planning Commission to deny a request from Troy Caldwell for an amendment to the Alpine Meadows General Plan in order to change the land use designation from community recreation, greenbelt, park, and open space to single-family residential, as well as a request to rezone the property from open space to single-family residential in order to construct a single-family residence. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission did recommend denial of this request. And with that, I'll hand it over to Steve for his presentation.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll just quickly orient you for the location of the Caldwell property. It is located in the eastern portion of Placer County, just south of Olympic Valley. Access to the property is from State Route 89 off of Alpine Meadows Road. The subject parcel itself is bound on 2 sides by roadway. Alpine Meadows Road to the north and Deer Park Drive to the northeast. Bear Creek does border the property to the south, and perhaps on the next slide here, You can see, actually, Cub Lane is just to the west. So we have residential areas just to the northeast, immediately south across Bear Creek, and to the west. It's undeveloped land immediately to the north. That area to the north of the property is actually the trailhead to the Five Lakes Trail. And I should also note, although the next slide will show it a little bit more clearly, just at the end of Cub Lane there's one building. It's an Avalanche shooting building. So the subject property does contain 4 different site constraints to it. The Avalanche shooting building that I just indicated, which as soon as I figure out the pointer here, this area that's, I guess, brown in color is Avalanche shooting building, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a minute. The blue line transects, over this way?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. The blue line right here is the water line that transects through the property. This line right here is a sewer line. And running north to south is an equestrian easement that provides access from Bear Creek down here over to the trailhead, Five Lakes Trailhead. I should note that on Friday we did receive a letter from Mr. Chadwick, the attorney for Mr. Caldwell. The letter provides discussion about a number of things, including the Avalanche shooting building and a couple other quote-unquote trespass issues for the property. It's important to note staff's position on this is that, well, and I'll get into the project description a little bit more detail, but that the general plan amendment and rezoning that are requested are not necessarily necessary in order to provide the easements that are described in that letter. The project description itself, moving to the site plan, you can see the proposed driveway access to this polygon right here, which would be the building site. The property itself is approximately 5 acres in size. Rather significant slopes just across the street here, and more significant slopes up towards the roadway, decreasing in topography as you approach Bear Creek. The applicant is proposing to site a building site right here. A couple of the site constraints, including Bear Creek and the 100-foot setback, as well as the equestrian easement, have reduced the proposed building site as part of the Planning Commission discussion. But what the applicant is proposing is to rezone and provide a general plan amendment to allow for the construction of a residence. Currently, the entire site is zoned open space, and with a general plan designation of open space, green belt, or community recreation. Just by way of brief history, Mr. Caldwell was originally of the belief that his parcel contained some residential single-family zoning along the creek. Staff did quite a bit of research through our archives and all the information that we had to try to substantiate this claim. What we were able to arrive at as a determination was that in all cases, the RS residential zoning stopped right at the edge of these parcels. So while the map that Mr. Caldwell had indicated that some of that RS residential zoning extended onto what he believed to be his property, it's staff's determination that the intent was to always have that residential single family end at those residential lots across the creek. Moving on to the next issue, the general plan amendment portion of the proposed request. Before you right now is the map of the 1969 Alpine Meadows general plan. What you can see from this plan is that it identified several different nodes or clusters of single-family residential, all of which are separated by different greenbelt and open space areas. It's important to note that in several different instances within the text of the Alpine Meadows General Plan, it provides discussion of maintaining these areas in as natural a state as possible. Also, you can see from this map, and I'll highlight it so it's a little bit easier to see, but the Alpine Meadows General Plan map itself actually did identify 3 different areas of avalanche slopes for potential concern of the, primarily due to the steep topography. And this was well prior to our the county adopted avalanche ordinance. So the applicant's proposal is to, in combination with the rezone request, also change the general plan designation. This would change it from the various different open space, greenbelt, and community recreation to single-family residential, which would allow for the construction of the 1 residential unit that is being proposed. The correspondence from Mr. Chadwick on Friday did provide some discussion of the text in the Alpine Meadows General Plan. In particular, page 34, the applicant's representative's assertion is that the language in there indicates that there's numerous open space areas within the Alpine Meadows region. And it goes on further to state that some of that would become residential zoning. It's staff's position that the language was crafted at the time when they were preparing the Alpine Meadows General Plan, and there was a vast portions of the valley were open space in nature, and it identified several of those that would either become community recreation or, in some instances, residential single family. It's our position that because to date the Caldwell property is still in open space, that it was never intended to be RS or residential single family zoning. The remaining portion, I won't spend too much time speaking to this, but an Avalanche Appeal accompanied the application that was for consideration before the Planning Commission. The procedure for that is a study is prepared by an avalanche expert. In this case, Mr. Penniman is a county recognized avalanche expert, and he determined that the Caldwell property itself should be reclassified in intensity of the potential avalanche hazard. You can see from the slide before you that the top portion here would be in the high avalanche hazard classification, the middle portion moderate, and down closer to the creek in a low hazard area. The Planning Commission, on a 4-to-1 vote with Commissioner Gray dissenting, adopted this avalanche report. It still maintains that it's in the PAHA, or potential avalanche hazard area. However, it did propose a reclassification. So lastly, we'll wrap up here with the action of the Planning Commission. Planning staff is bringing forward the Planning Commission's recommendation to your board for the denial of the General Plan Amendment and rezone. The vote for that was 3-2, with Commissioners Sevison and Moss voting for the project. Some of the issues that were raised at that were consistency with the general plan and rezoning. In particular, Commissioner Brentnall had concerns about what change in circumstances have occurred since the 1968 general plan that would warrant or justify the rezone away from open space to single-family residential. There was also some discussion about concerns with the avalanche designation as well, and impacts to some of the easements like the equestrian trail. There was also discussion of that. So Again, with that in closing, staff is bringing forward the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the general plan amendment and rezoning, subject to the findings that appear within the staff report, particularly that the proposed project would be inconsistent with the envisioned design of the Alpine Meadows general plan by reducing the open space and impacting the buffer zones that we had identified on the previous slide, and in particular that there have been no changes in circumstance that would warrant or allow the board to make the required findings. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
Questions, board members? Yes, Jennifer?
Thank you, Steve. I want to touch briefly on the avalanche designation piece. My understanding is Dick Penniman, who's really good at what he does, just downgraded the avalanche danger there. It is still an avalanche zone. In Placer County, we don't have prohibitions on building in an avalanche zone. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. The avalanche ordinance itself does allow for the construction of structures with several different mechanisms available to you. You can have an engineer certify that the structure will withstand the force of the avalanche, which happens to be one of the conditions that Mr. Penniman was recommending in the reclassification of the Avalanche Appeal. You can post the property and deed restrict it, warning people of the potential danger, or you can have the successful appeal out of the avalanche designation.
So then your recommendation then to deny the rezone is not based upon the avalanche danger, but the fact that it's open space and really nothing has changed since the 1968 general plan for the valley that would merit us rezoning this today. So it's not the avalanche piece, is that correct?
That's correct. There was some discussion in Mr. Chadwick's letter about the driving force behind the location of the open space, and while that may have been the case that the avalanche slopes identified were part of the reason for locating the open space in that area, staff's concern, and I believe the Planning Commission's concern, was the loss of that open space and the elimination of the buffer zones between the residential plots.
And has Alpine Meadows generally, in your opinion, developed along the lines of the general plan since 1968, or have we seen real changes from that plan?
I'm not aware of any general plan amendments that have been proposed or successfully approved to the Alpine Meadows general plan.
So this would set potentially some sort of precedent within Alpine Meadows?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Questions by board members? Mr. Rockham.
My question is, what you're asking us to do is to uphold the Planning Commission's decision, yet there was only 5 members there at the time of the vote, but here we've got water lines transecting this person's property without basically approval, right? We didn't do an eminent domain, they just put the pipes in, and then we got a shoot house on this property. So how do we rectify that?
The issues with the easement, it's staff's position that those issues could be resolved outside the general plan amendment and rezoning. And in essence, we don't need the approval of the general plan amendment and rezoning in order to address those easements, waterline easements, and the issue of the location of the avalanche sheeting building could be addressed outside this application.
Okay.
Other board members? Seeing none. Okay, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant at this time. Do you, how much time do you think you'll need to state your case here? 20 seconds. Can you get it in within 10 minutes?
Yes, for
Okay,
sure. I can make
fantastic. We'll go ahead and
in
set
10
it.
minutes there.
Should be a clock that just fired up right there in front of you on the podium, on your left side there.
I see it.
There you go.
Sophisticated. I didn't know that was there. That's honorable board members, thank you for your time. And also thank you for lending us your suits. Myself and Steve, we don't have suits in Tahoe, so we dress up once in a while, and we appreciate you lending to us. So we clean up good, huh, Steve? I just wanted to thank, oh, I'm sorry, my name is Troy Caldwell. I am the applicant and owner of the property, approximately 40-plus years resident of the area here. Wanted to thank both Paul and Steve for the many hours we've all put together trying to solve this problem here, and also some of the people in your background, Sarah Gilmore, Scott Finley, Chris Brown. A lot of people worked on this thing. We've been kind of hammering it out for a while, but appreciate your time for sure on that whole thing. Also, I'd like to thank a lot of the homeowners and stuff have come to support me here. Like me, they're a little bit afraid of the microphone, so they may not come up and grab this thing and talk, but I would like to have them all stand that have come and support, just so if they don't get a chance to take the mic, you'll understand they're here in that support. We appreciate you guys coming. Thank you. I'll pay you guys your $5. Anyway, I was going to give you just a little bit of history on Alpine Meadows, and I'm going to be a little mobile here because I'm not up to date with the pinpoint thing. I thought those laser things were on guns or something, so they haven't trusted me with those things, so I'm still at the cardboard era here. General plan, this is the copy of the general plan. Pretty old, 1968 is when this whole thing was adopted. March of 1968, the zoning map also follows shortly thereafter in the same year, 1968, and it is adopted in October. This is the parcel that we're talking about in question. I'm going to give you a little brief history as to the first building sites that were in the valley were basically to the east of this site, and those sites were done for a hotel. There was actually a 22-room hotel that was put into the valley there. It had 9 outbuildings there. It had a bunch of different cabins. They had stables, tennis courts, even had like they dammed up the creek there and made like a paddling pond inside of there. So that was kind of like the first initial development stuff that took place in there. It died off basically in 1928, and it just basically fell apart. It didn't get used. It was kind of the rich San Francisco folks came up to Alpine Meadows. We were kind of known at that point. I wasn't there, honest, but in 1888 they had Mineral Springs there, and people came up for the health facility and probably spent like a month, came in by stagecoach, and spent probably a good amount of time living in the wilderness there. So that thing kind of deteriorated. In 1955, a man named John Riley kind of appeared on the scene. He was associated with Squaw Valley on the opposite side of the valley we're in here, and was on the peak of the mountain, KT-22, looked down on the backside and thought that was a pretty developable place inside of there. So he made his first moves, and 2 of the homes that were built were on Lot A and C, and these actually exist today. These are the first 2 homes that exist, and they're still in existence now. Shortly thereafter, about 1961, unit development started taking place in the valley. Unit 1 and Unit 5 and Unit 3 and Bear Creek subdivision, they all took place probably about 1962, 63. This was prior to the general plan going in. Now, the particular parcel we're talking about is not a part of any of those developments. It was under a different ownership and was not part of those developments when they went in. 1968, the general plan was adopted and approved of March, and shortly thereafter, the map that you're looking at there was the adoption of the zoning map in there. That was the map I was given. I believed I had buildable property on that lower section of that property, so that was always what we kind of went with in that respect. Moving to the next exhibit in there, the location of these are going to be kind of reiterations. You may be able to see them better up on the big screen, but same things that Steve was showing here, basically the locations of the parcel and such in there. We had 2 goals basically in mind when we laid out moving moving what we called the TR1 to the other location. We didn't want to lose any open space. We believed that we had TR1, and we were just getting it out of the floodplain and moving it into another location. The light green square was the original proposal. At staff's recommendation from some of the input they were getting, we downsized it and shrank it to this pink size, and basically it got us out of the zone of the easement trail that was onto the west side of it, and got us out of the 100-year floodplain. It also kept us out of the zone for the water, or the sewer line, I guess is that lower one in there. Excuse me. And that's like one of the easements we propose in this whole process to give to the water district. Also like to thank the water district members. They've put a lot of time in this too to be here. I don't know if John Collins is here, the manager, but Virginia Quinan and Chuck Nungaster, both the board directors on that board, they've worked with us, trying to solve some of the problems. They realize these are old lines that went in unofficially, and they'd like to get some easements for maintenance on those. Okay, moving to my next exhibit. This is our Avalanche Zoning Map, same as Steve's in blue. We just did different colors because we change things up a little bit. Actually, in the original zoning thing that took place in Placer County, when Norm Wilson did the zoning of it, he refers to these particular three colors: red, which is the high hazard zone; blue, the low hazard zone; and yellow is the moderate zone for blue, and low is the yellow in there. Obviously, the red one has the most potential, blue has second most potential, and those are the two that are recognized in PAHA, the potential avalanche hazard, as being avalanche possibilities as far as county standards go. In the avalanche world, we recognize there are maybe very limited, but yellow is a very low hazard opportunity, but we do still recognize that color when we do analyzation of site-specific properties like that. So that's kind of how she lays out avalanche-wise. We located the second thing we tried to do in locating the project site was to get a buffer going between the houses that exist. And where we laid it out, we basically, the closest one is 300 feet, roughly a football field distance through there. There's a lot of trees and stuff in there, so it's not like we're looking across a cornfield. It's pretty buffered in itself and inside of there. So we think we did a good job in trying to, get it away from everybody else. One of the folks we were close to down here decided that was going to be too close, so they were pretty happy to see it go over there. So we were happy about achieving our two goals: 0 loss of open space, and 1 keeping the buffers around it and getting us kind of located where we weren't next to someone else. Last exhibit for me is the same one Steve was showing you, and that's the easements in there. And the yellow easement represents the hiking trail. This trail was put in for the equestrian. We have a horse stable at the bottom of the valley, and the horses were going up and down Alpine Meadows Road, and they were kind of leaving a mess. So we basically were looking for a back route for them to come around. They came around, and then it kind of jogs down through some other arms of open belt, crosses this particular property, and then goes to a Five Lakes trailhead where they were eventually headed with the horses inside of there. So that easement exists and will not be changed. We're very protective of that. So it's the only thing where you can actually cross the subdivisions. In the general plan, there was a lot of talk about putting in walking areas and such for people to stay off the roads. Those basically never existed. So this is it. So we're pretty protective of that as citizens in the valley, of keeping that in existence. The blue line, the green line, those are easements we'd like to give to the water district, and the red shooting building is another easement we'd like to give to the county to keep Alpine Meadows Road safe. I don't do this for a living, that's why I'm shaky. At this point, I'd like to introduce Bryn Chadwick from the law firm Downey Brand to fill in the details, and also like to thank him for his many hours he's put in with everybody trying to make this whole plan work. So, Braden, without further ado, I'll turn this over to you. Thank you.
And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and let your attorney speak, but I do want to point out that your 10 minutes for the applicant's presentation have run. We'll go ahead and hear from your attorney at this point.
And I'll try and be as quick as I can. My name is Bryn Chadwick. I'm attorney at Downey Brand, working in the South Placer office, and represent Troy Caldwell on this. I have a real quick PowerPoint presentation that I'll breeze through really quickly. I know that we're on a time schedule here, but I'll be as quick as I can. Okay, where do I aim this? There we go. All right, so there's a couple discussion points that I want to breeze through here, and there's basically 4 of them. The first is the zoning map that shows residential zoning on the property, and this was relied on by Mr. Caldwell when he bought the property, and it was a map that was given to him by the county. So we'll get into that. The second thing is the open space designation exists only because of perceived avalanche danger. There's greenbelt space within the community plan that is not connected to this, that this is not a part of. And we'll get into how we know that that's the reason why this is, the majority of this parcel was zoned open space, was because of avalanche danger and not because of any pod development. The third thing is that the avalanche danger that has actually been reduced after a site-specific report, and that has resulted in the changed circumstance that the Planning Commission was looking for. And fourth, of course, are the unresolved issues on the property. There's the shooting house, of course, and there's the water and the sewer lines that exist on the property, none of which were put in there with the landowner's permission. Okay, so there's the parcel, and as you can see, the rezone and the building area would take up less than an acre of a 5-acre property. So again, this is 5 acres, and there's only going to be 1 acre of property, or less than an acre of property, that's going to be affected by this, and that's it. So the first issue is residential zoning that exists on the property. Now, the official 1968 zoning map included approximately a ½ acre of TR1. That was called the single residence district. Now, the general plan, as has been mentioned by planning staff and Mr. Caldwell as well, envisioned that areas designated open space would be zoned TR1. That's a direct quote from the general plan. This actually says that areas designated as open space would be zoned TR1. And there's permutations in the TR1 zoning, but it basically says on page 34 that open space would be zoned TR1. Now, here is the snippet from the 1968 map that Mr. Caldwell put on the property. And you can see the highlighted portion there. That's the area, that's that ½ acre, that Mr. Caldwell thought he had on his property as far as zoning goes. Now, staff disagrees with that. But then again, this is from the 1968 zoning map that shows that sliver of zoning. Now, staff says, well, we think that's a mistake. Well, be that as it may, the map shows it. Now, there's a disclaimer on all the unofficial maps the county uses, including the planning department. And this disclaimer basically says, be careful when you're relying on these maps, because if you're looking for the real scoop on what the deal is, go back to what's recorded. Go back to the original map. Go back to what the county has recorded as part of its zoning maps. Now, then again, like I said, this map right here was given to Mr. Caldwell by the county. Okay? So I guess the other question is, why was such a large portion of the property zoned open space? That's a question, because it's a 5-acre parcel, all of it zoned open space, except for that sliver down at the bottom. Basically, avalanche danger was the original reason for the open space designation of the property. How do we know this? Well, again, here's the general plan map. This is located at the very last page of the general plan. And here's a close-up. And as you can see where those arrows are, you see avalanche areas. 3 avalanche areas. 1 right there, there, and there, and 3 open spaces areas, there, and there. Now, there's other open space that's all around through here, through the development itself. But these 3 areas, especially this one, Troy's property, which is right here, is open space simply because of this avalanche area. Well, if looking at the map wasn't enough for you, Norm Wilson, the county's expert, commented in the early 80s, and he said basically that the open space zoning in the area was linked to the avalanche danger. Now, you see this in the staff report. Staff acknowledges this, that a large part, maybe the reason, staff says, and staff says, look, we don't really know for sure, but staff says that's a large part of why this was zoned open space, is because of the avalanche danger. Subsequent correspondence from Michael Henn provides a second witness as to the real reason that the open space designation on the property. And he also says, look, I agree with Norm Wilson. I was there. I know for a fact that the reason this was zoned open space was because of avalanche danger. That's why. It wasn't because it's supposed to be a park. It wasn't because it's supposed to be, this, tree stand or anything like that. He basically says it's because of the avalanche danger. And again, here's a picture of that letter that I'll just fast forward. That's the Norm Wilson letter from the 80s that says that. So in 1968, open space equals perceived avalanche danger for those three parcels, especially Mr. Caldwell's parcel. So rather than acting as some kind of buffer between pods of residential development, okay, the general plan map shows this open space designation directly corresponds to the avalanche danger, and that's it. So, changed circumstances, what are they? If that's what we're looking for, now keep in mind that's not a finding that you have to make. There's not an official finding that you have to find that there's changed circumstances. But if we were to say that there was one, where can you hang your hat? Well, the changed circumstances are that 2005 report by Mr. Penniman, mentioned in the staff report. A site-specific report for Mr. Caldwell's property said in 2005 that the Paha avalanche danger zones should be reduced to more accurately reflect the danger of avalanche. So on October 8th, 2009, the MAC unanimously approved this project 7-0, and that's not something I saw mentioned in the staff report or the presentation, is that the MAC actually said this is a great idea, unanimously approved it. And the MAC also, on October 8th, said, you know what, we agree with Mr. Penniman, we're going to lower that avalanche danger. October 22nd, 2009, the Planning Commission also agreed to lower that danger. So in other words, you have a very low danger where the house is being proposed to be built. Now, that's the changed circumstance. So just to clear this completely up, the reason for the open space was because of the avalanche danger. Okay, that's a fact. We have county documents for it. You see the map because of it. And the second thing is, of course, that changed circumstance is the reduction of that avalanche danger. It's no longer that same danger, and it's a buildable area now. So, again, previously the perceived avalanche danger prevented development. Now the PAHA designation allows residential development. And the unresolved issues, this is not something that we're hanging our hat on. It's just something that can be addressed in the same process. The county shooting house, it's speaking with Mr. Finley too. It's kind of it's kind of a question as to where that comes from. The county has no records of permits being pulled for that or anything like that, and there's no building permits that were ever pulled for it or anything like that. But the fact is, it's there. It's on its property. There's no easement for it, and the county contracts with Alpine Meadows to shoot the avalanche gun there. And the Alpine Springs County Water District used the property for placements of its facilities without an easement or permission of the owner. And again, these aren't huge issues. It's not a quid pro quo. We're not saying, we're going to sue you unless you give us this designation. Basically, there are unresolved issues on the property that we can tie up with this process. So, again, the changed PAHA results in a changed circumstance. The proposal, and again, I think this may have gotten blown out of proportion, involves the construction of one single-family residence on a lot that has existing structures. Mr. Caldwell has changed the location of the proposed building site at the request of staff to ensure the structure isn't within the 100-year flood zone. He's moved the location of the building site to allow for the unobstructed use of the equestrian trail and to keep it open space. The remainder of the property will retain its open space designation. And again, this is for just one single-family residence on this property. And there's no conflict between uses there, between the surrounding uses. There's single-family homes all around him and on much smaller lots. So again, this is a 5-acre lot that he wants to put one single-family home on, and the rest would remain open space. So then the last question is, does this set a precedent? And the precedent that it sets is not one at all. Basically, it's not a precedent to say, well, there's a general plan amendment that was made to one general plan that hasn't been updated since 1968. Well, it's general plans change based and are amended based on circumstances. And again, this doesn't set a precedent that everyone in the valley can come and submit an application and you have to approve it. This is a very site-specific and, dare I say, very unique circumstance that involves a changed circumstance that was changed from circumstances that were there in 1968. So again, I'd urge and respectfully request that this board approve this general plan amendment and rezone to allow the construction of one single-family home on this 5-acre parcel. I'm here for any questions if the board has any.
Yes, council had a question.
I'm unclear. Mr. Finley's worked on it, a lot of other staff. I'm late to the question. When exactly did Mr. Caldwell buy the property? What year did he acquire it?
1989.
And when he acquired the property, was the shooting house in existence and open and apparent on the property?
There were several different versions of the shooting house. It's modified to take a structure because of the snow accumulation around the cannon. We couldn't find the points to do the shooting, so a structure was built around that. I'm not exactly sure of the dates on it.
Okay, was that before you acquired the property or after?
That was after. It was before. Everything was on there before I acquired the property.
Okay, and was that be true also of the two water lines and the sewer line?
Those also were on.
Thank you.
Any other board members have questions of council at this point? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much. Any staff response to anything at this point? Because if not, I'll just go ahead and open up public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment at this point. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item, please step forward, identify yourselves, and please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Hello, my name is Ray O'Brien. Live in Tahoe City for the last 48 years. Seen numerous changes throughout the local community, and am here to support Troy, or Mr. Caldwell, on his rezoning. And I also work for the fire department, so I've seen a lot of stuff that has been happening with defensible space and all our zoning requirements and all our requirements that we require for new construction. And I know that Troy has met with the fire department. He's going by all the requirements. This property, once it has a single-family residence on it, will have access for fire trucks. Troy plans or intends to put in a fire hydrant, which will help. I don't know, up in Tahoe, fire hydrants are few and far between. So our fire equipment has to get bigger and bigger so we can carry more water, more hose, and be able to protect these houses. The other item that amazes me about Troy is his construction. He's done his homework. He knows this area, and his construction is usually steel and concrete. As a fire department, that's pretty cool for us, and it's going to help us a lot. But really, what's mostly going to help is that we see a lot of lots and a lot of property that the owners don't live in the area, or they cannot develop it, so therefore they don't take care of it. And so the defensible space is not there. With Troy being able to build on this property, I envision that he will be taking care of his property, making it fire safe, enhancing the community, and making the whole area that much safer for us to protect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Jim Plain, and I'm a resident of Tahoe City. I'm here to offer a little more historical perspective through some things that I know. I started working at Alpine Meadows back in 1969 on the ski patrol. In 1977, I was asked to be Alpine Meadows' first full-time avalanche forecaster. And in the summer of '82, I was given the great privilege to assist Norm Wilson on his study of the avalanche hazards in the eastern portion of Placer County, study that was done for the county. During that study, I recall that there was a lot of discussion about how the development came to be the way it was in Alpine Meadows, because there are a number of residential lots that are located in avalanche hazard zones, and then there's also this one particular exception where no development actually had occurred, at least until possibly now. But I remember in those discussions Norm telling me that the main reason that that was open space was that the east and west gully on the backside of KT 22 were very clearly the biggest and most major avalanche hazards along that portion of Alpine Meadows Road. And early on in the development of Alpine, the other areas that were avalanche zones were not felt to be real significant hazards, and that therefore prohibiting development in those spots did not take place. And I was also in '82 asked by the U.S. Forest Service, who is one of the co-partners in doing the avalanche control work in Alpine Meadows, to look for a site that would be the best spot to locate a place where we could mount the howitzer to shoot the avalanches on the backside of KT. And I was asked to do that irregardless of property ownership and whatnot, but just to find the best spot. And we determined over the course of the summer that the best location to shoot from for a permanent gun mount would be the one that did get built at the end of Cub Lane. And just to wrap it up real quick, I was not involved with, again, looking at the actual, who owned the land and how to get the permission. I was just asked to pick that spot, the best spot. So anyway, that's kind of what I know about it.
Anybody else wish to address the board at this time? Sir, please go ahead. Can I see just an indication of the number of folks that are going to be interested in talking on this item at this point? Do I see any other hands? Nope. Okay, then this will probably be our last speaker. Go ahead, sir.
Chairman, members of the board, thanks for the opportunity to come in and speak briefly. My name is Chris Nelson, resident of Portland, Oregon. My wife and I own a small piece of property on the south side of the creek, directly across from where Troy's property is. And Troy was nice enough to walk me around the property and explain sort of how he sited this one particular residential lot. And I guess what I think is important to keep in mind outside of the technical findings that I think his attorney did a good job of outlining was that to the east and the west, it's very compatible with the existing uses that are there. The open space trail, which starts up on Alpine Meadows Road, runs through Troy's property, crosses a bridge through our property, is still perpetuated. So that intent of a green belt and an open space area has not been impaired. And the density in what he's asking for is one lot on 5 acres. There may be a lower density site in the valley that I'm not aware of, but it's certainly among the lowest. And I think given the general nature of the general plan, which was not as detailed as I think you probably see in today's world, the change circumstances that were articulated, I think, do speak to the fact that with better information, more specific information on the intent and what he's asking for, that what he's asking for is a very reasonable thing, all things considered. So I just wanted to state my support for Troy's application.
Thank you. One last opportunity for anybody that didn't stick their hand up. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board at this point. Any board members have any questions of staff? Yes, Ms. Montgomery, go ahead.
I have a couple clarifying questions just to make sure I understand. The applicant stated that there would be zero loss of open space based upon his assertion that there was some TR1 zoning that had sort of, it looked like from his map, seeming kind of crossed the creek. Can you address that a bit more?
Let me get the slide right now, but staff's determination that TR1 or modern day RS zoning does not exist on the property and wasn't intended to exist on the parcel. You can see from might be able to see from the map here in just a second. But in one way or the other, I think to answer your question, yes, there would be a loss of open space. It's not being offset with the proposal to create open space somewhere else, which was what, when staff originally started working with Mr. Caldwell, that was we were going off the assumption that there was RS zoning there until further research identified that, as best we could tell, it had never been there, actually. Thanks, Greg. And you can see, actually, I'll try to be kind with the laser pointer. Well, how about over here? There's actually another parcel in between the residential parcels that we have verified as being RS zoning. I don't know, can all the board members see it up there? Oh, there we go. So it in fact would result in approximately 1 acre of loss of open space.
What is the ownership of that parcel that's between Mr. Caldwell's parcel and the RS that's shown below that?
I believe it's owned by the Homeowners Association.
And is that also an open space designation?
That is, yeah, actually, all of the shading is consistent with the different land use designations. So this happens to be yellow because that's the proposed zoning of RSB 43, which would be a 1 acre minimum so that it couldn't be further subdivided. But the actual zoning map shows this is all one consistent color, all open space, all designated the same in the general plan as well.
So just so I understand your answer, there would be loss of open space even if the half acre that the proponent alleges really did exist?
Correct.
Okay. There was a mention of a fire hydrant. Where is the closest existing fire hydrant to this parcel? Do we know?
I have no idea.
I
Yeah.
hadn't heard it till today. Otherwise, I would have gone out and looked for
Yeah,
it.
I'm not at all aware of that.
Okay. On the issue with the NITRAC, they did vote 7-0 in favor of this proposal. Just to be clear, when this was brought in front of the NITRAC, they understood that there were guarantees in writing as to the easements being given to the water district and to the county. My understanding is those at that time were not in writing. Are those now guaranteed in writing?
No, the easements are not secured in writing at this time, and we should also note that NITRAC being an advisory council, there were no findings required of NITRAC to be made to support the approval. Furthermore, at that meeting, there was no public opposition in attendance either. So.
And I'm really asked because a number of the NITRAC members have expressed concern to me that they thought one thing about the easements when they made their vote at that point to support the zoning change, which they then discovered was not actually the case. And I'm not saying they changed their votes. I'm just saying they were a little bit uncomfortable with understanding what was the actual proposal in front of them. There's been a reference to, I think it's page 24 in the plan, in the community plan or the general plan, that said something that it referred to allowing residential development in the open space. Can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, let me just kind of chime in here. It's on page 34, I think.
30.
Is where it was. And it says, there is considerable park and open space, and that's in quotes, shown on the plan. Most, if not all, would fall under section 8.100, and then in parentheses 7, allowing private recreation lands, etc., and would also be zoned TR1. And I think what the staff interprets there is that, yeah, there is open space in the plan area. It's not been developed yet, and some of that open space may get changed into TR1 through the land development process. Again, I'm trying to interpret that. That's what I take that as meaning. I'm not sure if that's the best way I would have said that, but there's also other sections that do say that single-family residential on the same page is predominantly in the TR1 zone. It doesn't say open space equals residential zoning. So, and throughout time in the zoning ordinance, open space has never been permitted to have single-family residential on it.
Okay.
Maybe just to clarify on the comment relating to the easements, I think Mr. Caldwell's assertion is that he would be happy to obtain approval of easements from those utility districts if that was what the board wanted to in reviewing their, or considering his rezoning and general plan request.
And also, just to clarify, nothing prevents that with the open space designation? Okay.
His own assertion to dedicate those easements.
Okay, and then my last clarifying question on this is, are there other areas in the general vicinity that fall into the same sort of pod-like development, for lack of a better term? I mean, are the only open spaces, in other words, at the bottom of avalanche runouts, or are there other open spaces that are not at the bottom of avalanche runouts?
Not the clearest map here, but no, there are other areas identified separating the residential clusters.
Actually, maybe if you might be able to go to page 6 of your packet, and you can see it's Exhibit A that shows a blow-up of the general plan map. And you can see, yeah, there is areas that, including Mr. Caldwell's property, that's right across the street from an avalanche map, but there is also other areas, what they indicate, the pod areas on that map. You can see the cluster of residential development on that map itself. So that kind of...
So the stuff that looks like it might be marked as marsh on a map is the open space?
Yes, it's community park, green belt, open space. It's a long length of descriptors.
Thank you. Those are all my clarifying questions for now. I'll wait to make any other comments.
Questions from other board members? I have a question. The staff report says, staff brings forward the Planning Commission recommendation to deny a request. What was staff's recommendation going to the Planning Commission? Okay. All right, Supervisor Rockham.
I have a comment. I don't have a question.
Please go ahead.
In looking at this, and I also met with Mr. Caldwell in my office, his property is surrounded by residential. And where he wants to locate this, seems to me that it's not an unreasonable request. I would be inclined to grant his request, and it looks like you've got something in there. If we voted to go that way, you'd want to continue this and bring it back to us?
That's correct. If it is the board's direction to approve this request, we would want to continue this item, and we'd want to prepare the findings. We would have to prepare a resolution for the general plan amendment ordinance for the rezoning, and we would want to bring that back for your consideration. And as a part of that request, we could also, if you choose, require that prior to coming back to you that Mr. Caldwell secure the easements from the utilities. We could also do that before and get those recorded before we come back.
For the utilities, not secure the easements from them?
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
You said he would secure the easements from the utilities. You mean that in the reverse, don't you? That he would provide the easements for the utilities?
Right. But, I mean, in looking at this piece of property, the Avalanche, I mean, here, the guy's got a shoot house now on his property, which he has no objections to because of the safety issue. He's got the easements going across. He bought this property unknown, I guess, that was even there. It should have been disclosed, I guess. But it just looks like, to me, it's just an unreasonable expectation to say somebody owns over 5 acres and they can't do anything with this because somebody determined it was open space. He's still going to leave the largest chunk of this open, in my opinion, and actually make it better. And if he puts a fire hydrant on there at some point and provides better access to it, it looks like to me that his surrounding neighbors would be better for the effort. So anyway, I would be inclined to grant Mr. Caldwell what he wants.
In looking at the map, I mean, we're talking about a general plan that was done back in 1968, and I was still in high school, by the way, just for the record.
Were you really?
I was.
I was a year old.
I was out of high school.
Sorry I started that. Now I regret it. But it looks to me like the open space designation on this property is because of the Avalanche designation that was done in the general plan review. But you must have looked at that. Do you have an opinion? Staff have an opinion on that?
I think if you look at the general plan map, you can see it clearly right across the street. I mean, Steve's got it pulled up right now. Right across the street, you can see what they thought at the time and what is, currently an avalanche zone. And as Mr. Chadwick pointed out, it's not just in that area. There's avalanche areas and corresponding open space zones elsewhere within the general plan. So that was at least one of the reasons, as well as providing what Steve indicated, the cluster pod development. So I think in combination, that's why we got what we got today.
Shoot more and danger.
Anything else, Robert? Okay. Down here, Supervisor Holmes.
Is there any history of the avalanches in that area? And if so, how far down has the avalanche encroached onto this parcel?
I don't have that information.
I'm sure Mr. Caldwell could probably provide that information if you choose.
Sir, do you have some information that you can share?
Yes, I do have information on it. Jim Plain is probably the most recognized avalanche expert in our area at this point, so I may turn the mic over to him. But since 1970, Alpine Meadows has been shooting that as protection of Alpine Meadows Road. And in that process, we've been able to keep records of when it does and doesn't cross. And if I could, in a rough estimation, we shoot that thing approximately 10 times a year. It gets to the road probably one time of those 10 shots, and it would cross the road maybe once in maybe 3 or 4 times totally in that since 1970. And the penetration into it is basically that blue section that you see there. Our records basically show, that activity level in there, and we have accurate ones if we need to bring up documentation for it. Could I refer to Jim on?
I think. Supervisor?
Did I answer that at all?
When do you determine to shoot the weapon or the?
There's a snow stake basically at the ski area that we kind of monitor everything on. When it reaches a 20-inch pattern, we realize that we're getting pretty iffy down at the road section, and then they send the crews down to do that function of shooting it. So we need to basically accumulated 20 inches on the ground, and then it gets attention.
And how often, do you have any idea how often that occurs?
In the course of a year, approximately 10 times we'll shoot it. Thank you.
Did I answer it? Any other questions, Jennifer?
Looking at this, I see two things that I've really been trying to grapple with, and they're both policy issues rather than issues related specifically to zoning. Obviously, the first policy issue is we have a plan from 1968 that hasn't ever been updated, and frankly, there may be no need to update it because Alpine Meadows is largely built out. Most folks in the community feel pretty happy with the plan as it exists. I've had a number of discussions with people in there, but I think there's a real question about our commitment on a policy level to updating these sorts of plans, and I think we need to redouble our efforts on that front. Kirk was 1 year old. That's a little frightening, frankly. The other policy issue, and this is really the bigger one, is do we want to establish a policy of taking what is open space in an admittedly old plan, but designated as open space, and using spot zoning to change that? I think there are enough questions about this particular piece that's open to debate. I would say from my perspective, as a general plan, or as a general rule, I should say, not plan, unless we're going to have some sort of trade-off of open space for open space, rezoning open space to something else is not a policy that I can support. I would need to see something very specific as a trade-off to make that decision to rezone open space for residential. So it's really the two policy issues. What is our policy about open space, and what is our policy about general and community plan updates? And I will obviously defer to my board, but let's think about those two issues for the future.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing from staff is that right now, should the board decide to move forward with an approval, we don't have appropriate findings documentation in front of us to make that approval. I'm curious how we have a hearing on these things without that stuff. A little tough for the board to act in the affirmative without knowing what findings we're going to be asked to adopt when that happens. So I guess what I'm looking for at this point is, Supervisor Rockholm?
No, go ahead and finish.
I guess what I'm looking for at this point is if there's a motion on the board seeking action at this point, or if it is the board's pleasure to continue the item until we have the findings and the rest of the data in front of us that would be necessary should we decide to vote in the affirmative. In other words, do we take a vote right now and assuming it's a vote in the affirmative, bring stuff back that we would then have to adopt, or do we simply delay the decision until we actually have everything in front of us that we can review that would then lead to us making a motion either to adopt specific findings or to go ahead and deny the request? Yes, go ahead.
So if the board is inclined to grant the appeal and move forward with an affirmative action on behalf of the applicant, I think I would expect that we would get a direction by way of motion from the board to staff to prepare the appropriate documents. We'd spell out in the motion some detail as to what the board was expecting in terms of the conditions. We've heard a lot of things about the fire hydrant. We've heard things about easements. We've heard things about the shooting house. Clearly, the proposed driveway seems to run through the highest avalanche zone, if I understood it right. And so there may be times where the driveway and access would be closed off. We want to make sure all those things are appropriately conditioned. If those are important to the board, I think you can make a motion to staff, bring this back, notice it appropriately for an approval, and definitely take a vote saying we want to uphold the appeal, but bring it back for further action on the details of the approval of the general plan and rezoning. Because as clearly indicated, we don't have a zoning ordinance or a general plan amendment before you. But I think you can pretty much lay out where you're headed. On the other hand, if there was a denial, the denial would be pretty straightforward.
Yes, Jennifer.
And I would actually like to open this up if there's no more discussion from the board with a recommendation to actually support the staff recommendation and move for denial on this, realizing that my board may not well second that.
Okay, we have a motion for staff recommendation denying the application. Do we have a second on that? And hearing none, it dies for lack of a second. So is there a subsequent motion, Supervisor Rockholm?
I would make a motion outlining a lot of what Tony said, but also conditioning it with that the appropriate easements would be documented and turned over to wherever they need to be, so that that we document this perfectly, so that everything at the end of the day, and then it would be also as part of the motion is to bring back what we need to approve this project. I guess is that Tony?
That's fine. I think staff gets the direction. We've heard from the various testimonies. I would add, having been here since 1984, and having worked on several avalanche lawsuits and the remnants of the lawsuits from the 70s, and many discussions with Alpine Ski Corporation about who's in charge of avalanches, until I read this report, I had never known that the county was the owner of a building is in charge of avalanche control.
I was surprised to see
And so that's one issue that needs to be resolved, because I think that would be a new liability and responsibility the county executive officer did not know he had. And, but other than that, I think we could clear this up in terms of the appropriate conditions for the general plan amendment and the rezoning and bring it back based upon Supervisor Rockholm's direction and motion, if there's a second.
well, there-
Paul
yeah.
has a question.
Yes, well, there is a motion at this point. Okay, thank you. Okay, so under discussion, the motion, please go ahead.
Maybe just a clarification as to what easements, dedication of easements that would be for the sewer, water, shoot house. Okay.
I guess to build on what just
You showed the trail as well. The trail is marked. Were easements secured for the trail already?
I believe the easement is already there. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe there was,
Well, let's just make sure that we got, because those were the four things I saw, was the shoot house, the sewer, the water, and the trail.
Well, they clearly identify who actually should be in charge of that shoot house and give them the responsibility.
Okay.
And also under discussion motion, I would like to see something brought back, even though it's you can say pretty much most places up here, you're in some kind of avalanche danger. I would like to see something that we bring back as a part of this, recognizing that this was done at an applicant's request, indemnifying us to the greatest extent possible, that should there at some point in the future be an avalanche that actually damages the residents or causes any kind of loss of life or any damage on the driveway. I mean, I can see somebody driving in on the driveway and being overtopped. Anything that the board took this action with the applicant's full knowledge that we were transversing an avalanche area and allowing for residents to be built in a known avalanche area, even though it's a low area. So whatever your office is comfortable with by way of indemnification of the county, if we were to allow residents to go in this area, I think it'd be prudent for us to see that.
Can we confirm with the applicant that
I'm sorry, go ahead and speak.
I'd like to confirm with the applicant that the many announcements that have been attached to this motion are they're in agreement with and would be willing to work with us on.
Shake your head, yes.
They're acknowledging yes with a nod of the head for the record.
Okay. And then let's, any other discussion under the motion by board members? I'd like to just add, I am in general very concurrent with what you outlined, Jennifer, in terms of the, you don't normally see, well, we'll just take open space and just throw residents on it. I'm comfortable with what has been laid out here in terms of the original intent essentially being there is danger associated with this. Looking at that upslope on the opposite side of the road, it's clear this is a dangerous area, and I think in 1968 they were prudent to identify this area as unsuitable for housing because of that danger. I think that number one, history, and number two, good aggressive avalanche management practices have now identified as a part of this anyway as safe for a dwelling. And I have to, well, I don't have to believe, I do believe that had that designation, had that been identified as safe back when the plan was going forward, they more than likely would have identified this potentially as part of that entire housing with the creek, nice areas separating and all the rest. So there still is a maintenance of open space. We're still getting the benefit of the protection. But I do agree, it's not every day you see just open space being converted to residential. And as a practice, it's not something I embrace. So concur with that. If there are no other comments on the motion, we'll go ahead and ask for a roll call, please.
Well, we need a second.
Oh, we had a second by Supervisor Holmes.
Oh, Jim said, okay.
We wouldn't have been talking this long if there wasn't a second, trust me. I'd have shut it down a while ago. Between you and Jim, you guys taking turns listening to the meeting?
Well, we were around. We were around in 1968.
Yeah, I was too.
Yes.
Wygant?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Montgomery?
No.
Euler?
Aye. All right, so this item will be re-agendized with all appropriate findings brought back to us for final action. And thank you very much for your time on the item. And we'll go ahead and move on to our 2:35 optimistically timed item.
3:35.
Yes. With our 2:35 timed item, and this is Community Development Resource Agency Planning Rezone Gondola North Homesite Subdivision, considering a recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve a rezone approximately 6.1 acres from forestry to, and 4.07 acres open space to approximately 10 acres of single-family residential combined minimum building site, 8,000 square feet. And I'm going to let staff take it from there before I read a whole bunch of stuff that's just going to be repeated. All right, Stacy.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The next item is the Gondola North Homesite Project Rezone. And to briefly get you acquainted as to where the property is located, it is in the Sugar Bowl Ski Resort area, which is also considered their village core area. The site is accessed off of Donner Pass Road from Interstate 80. The current zoning is forestry and open space, and the general plan designation is resort and recreation. This slide just shows the general vicinity of the area, and I'm not sure my pointer is going to work for you. The location is to the right of the vertical snow line, area of snow. The horizontal line is actually the railroad tracks. And also the slide is to show the existing development within the area. Over the past 15 years, a number of subdivisions have been approved within the Sugar Bowl area, some of which were granted rezonings, and I will go into that later in the presentation. The project applicant is here today requesting a rezone for a 25 residential lot subdivision. The rezone specifically is requesting that approximately 6 acres of forestry land and 4 acres of open space be rezoned to single-family residential with a minimum building site of 8,000 square feet. As a result of the open space proposed within the yellow area, the yellow area that has the black stripes going through it, that is the open space area, the 4-acre open space parcel. As a result, to compensate for that approximate 4.07 acres, the applicants are proposing to also, in this same rezone request, to rezone 4.1 acres of land which is currently zoned residential forestry development reserve, and that area is in the dark blue area off to the left-hand side. I'm so sorry, I'm not getting this to work. So again, I'll just recap that. They are proposing to, let me see if this one works. No, I'm out of luck. Okay. So they are proposing to compensate for the open space loss that is being proposed for the subdivision. As I mentioned, over the past 15 years, a number of subdivisions have been approved. And this slide depicts where those subdivisions have been constructed today, actually. And over the years, the Board of Supervisors has authorized rezonings, which included a total of approximately 12.58 acres of open space to be rezoned to residential. However, as a result of that, and again, through all of these different subdivisions, the applicants have rezoned 82 acres from other residential zones to open space. So resulting in more open spaces, it continues to be maintained in the Sugar Bowl area. And furthermore, the character of the Sugar Bowl area is still maintained and preserved. And that's the intent of this rezone and subdivision as well. In February of 2010 of this year, the Planning Commission recommended that, or excuse me, I should say, the Planning Commission actually approved the vesting tentative map for the 25 residential subdivision, a conditional use permit for a ski lift operation, like a rope tow, to modify the existing one, and to allow for a variance to the building height, whereas the building height for the single-family residential zone district is 30 feet, and the allowable, what they're asking for, is 36 feet due to the amount of snow in this area. The Planning Commission also forwarded a recommendation of approval of the rezones based upon the consistency with the general plan and land use designations. The Development Review Committee and staff is recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt the mitigated negative declaration, determining that that document is adequate and complete, and to approve the rezonings as presented in my presentation. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions, if you may have them.
Questions by members of the board, questions of staff? Yes, Jennifer?
So if I understand this correctly, I think there's a slightly different number on here than was in our package. My understanding was the rezone from residential forest to open space was slightly larger than the rezone from open space to residential.
The applicants are, the rezone for their subdivision area is 4.07 acres.
And sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Thank you. Thank you. So there is a net gain of open space in this case. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? We'll hear from the applicant at this time. If there's a representative of the applicant here, please.
Hello, Chris Parker with Sugarbowl Ski Resort, and I have nothing to add to Stacy's presentation. I thank staff for their help, and any questions you might have, I can answer.
I don't have any questions of the applicant at this point.
Good presentation.
Yeah. All right. We'll go ahead and open up this part. Is this a notice public hearing? Yeah, okay. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this point. Any members of the public wish to address the board? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, come back to the board.
That was quick.
Yes. Do I have a motion? I was looking for a second.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Supervisor Rockholm, second by Supervisor Montgomery to approve the item. Under discussion, I want to thank Michael and his staff for being available at both sites today for tours. And thank you for getting out in the elements to provide those tours. That was very helpful. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
And the motion included the findings on page 51 and 52 of your agenda, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Didn't you hear that?
All right, so that was a unanimous approval of the motion, including the findings on page 51 and 52, as noted by council. All right, thank you very much. We do have agendized a reception that is being hosted by, well, a number of different entities. That will be from 4:30 to 6:30 this evening, just over here at the Little Irish Pub. And until then, we're going to hopefully not take up the entire hour in closed session, but we'll move into closed session where we will take up various items.
Okay. The board will go into closed session and we'll take up the discussion of two existing litigation matters and one discussion of labor. I think we're going to do labor first.